Welcome to the Week Ahead, a podcast by SBM Intelligence. I'm your host, Veronica Pana Igube. Every Friday, we explore stories that are shaping our continent. SBM Intelligence just released its annual report that looks at the economy of kidnapping in Nigeria. While the number of victims is down almost 50% from 2024, the amounts paid as ransom has more than doubled. Are kidnappers becoming more efficient? Nigeria and Brazil have signed an air service agreement to enable direct flights, strengthen trade, tourism, and cultural ties and boost our economic cooperation. Air Peace and Control will operate the route with up to 5 weekly flights. How can both nations ensure these partnerships delivers lasting impact? Ghana has removed the minimum capital requirement for foreign investors to attract more investment and job, while the Bank of Ghana now restricts large firms from withdrawing foreign currency without matching deposits to protect the cedi. Policy critics warn may hurt businesses. How can Ghana encourage investment while maintaining its currency stability? Joining us today for further insight is Samuel Article, a policy analyst. Welcome, Samuel, to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
It's
Yes.
great. It's great to be having you on the podcast. Let's start with the SBM Intelligence annual report, which looks at the economy of kidnapping in Nigeria. It's quite alarming that we are seeing the statistics that we're seeing. So we're seeing the number of kidnapping has gone down drastically. Does that show that the government is working and they're trying to address the issue of kidnapping and other insecurity? But we're also seeing a shift in the increase of the it kind of a doubling in the amount of ransom that is being paid. So I think that we should just first start talk about like what the report is about to just give viewers like a sense of or insight into what the report aims to do as well, and then just talk about like the key findings that we got from the report.
I think just like you rightfully said, I'm sure people will be happy to learn that the total number of kidnapping case in Nigeria dropped. I won't use the word drastically because, I mean, I know it's drastic, but because it's kidnapping, it's a crime, you want it to be near zero, even zero. So, but at least we've seen significant improvement in the spite of kidnapping. I mean, looking closely at the numbers, despite the fact that kidnappers are demanding 48 billion, I think they were able to collect about 2.56, an estimated 2.56 billion thereabouts. Um, if you try to put that in context, in terms of the US dollars, you're talking about $1.6 million. That's the economy. That's the size of the kidnapping economy in Nigeria. And it tells us a lot of things, that things are coming down in terms of the size. But again, it's not just that. I think there are many factors to that. For instance, the Naira had collapsed. And then because of that, I know, criminals are demanding more. And then the ability of Nigerians to pay, meaning that Nigerians are now poorer, has also been impacted, right? But regardless of this, it's still very bad to think about the fact that even in the 2020s, during the height of the Niger Delta problems, right, we're not still, I mean, we're still far off from that pivot. I mean, if you take that as the pivotal period. And so it's not encouraging. I think that's the first thing the report talks about. The second thing is about the geographical concentration itself of kidnapping. The Northwest is now the epicenter, right? Accounting for almost 60% of victims. Remember, when this thing started, it started taking it together. It started maybe in the South, predominantly. It's been happening everywhere. Then it started moving to the Southeast. But as we speak today, the epicenter, I'll call it the kidnapping capital, is somewhere in this northwestern region of the country. Specifically, I think a lot of incidents are in Zamfara and Katsina, is something to become careful about, and it tells us a lot of things. What is driving this? Those are key questions that the report actually did flag. The third one it talks about is the fact that the brutality of people indulging in kidnapping had gone up. Before, uh, it was not as terrible as this. So, in the past, there's this unspoken contract that, oh, if you pay, you get your relative back. But what SBN report is actually showing is that sometimes, even if you pay, uh, people still get executed. And that raises a lot of questions, right, around the brutality, the mindset of those that are indulging in kidnapping. Is it just merely for economic reasons? Is it transactional or is it no longer transactional? I think those are the key things. Just to say, that's the key third takeaway from the report. I think the fourth one is about the militancy concept that started it. If you take it historically, remember in Niger Delta, during the Niger Delta kidnapping situation, it was built around, they were targeting oil workers. And then by extension, they were using it as a means to put pressure on government and then on the oil company, the OICs, to actually drop some money, right? But now, over time, it's gone to the north, and then you have people like ISWAB, Boko Haram, and then other splinter groups involved in this thing. And again, that raised a question around whether we've moved away from militancy into an industrial crime. I think the SBM report found that Islamic group now takes over a third of all ransom payments. That is dangerous, right? Essentially, they've used how would I call it? They use the kidnapping situation as a toolkit to begin to fund themselves, funding terrorism. And that means government needs to work even harder. I think those are the key takeaway for me. I'll just end by saying that kidnapping are more efficient. That's the truth. They are not efficient. They are casting their, I'll call it their net wider. We always say expand the task net, expand the tech net. So kidnappers are now expanding their task net, and then they are demanding more money. Inflation, issues like that, they are more brutal, they have more leverage. And then what we are witnessing in Nigeria is the industrialization of kidnapping, unfortunately. I think we need to find a way to end all these things. I hope government will, will do the right thing.
I mean, there's something you said that was just like the industrialization of kidnapping, and it's really, really sad. And you took us down history lane where you say how it started and how it's evolving now, and it's even becoming a business. I think the report also pointed out that there's a rise in mass abductions, right? It's now common, and victims are even sometimes forced into labor as to working in farms and mines. So there's kind of like a shift from not only kidnapping people for ransom, but I mean, if you can't pay the ransom, it's like, okay, we need you to work on the farms, we need you to work in our mines to also bring out money for us. Um,
Yeah.
do you think that, I mean, what do you think is the driving force? I mean, you can say the driving force is to benefit economically as well. So if you can't bring me money, you can bring me labor, which would in turn would bring in money. But then how does the government ensure that they address this issue of kidnapping? Because if we're having the report, we're having the statistics, although we're seeing the numbers drop. But why? I mean, you talked about it being a crime, and we don't want it to reduce. We want it eliminated totally. Because if people, I mean, and you also mentioned like there's this change of you pay the ransom and you're still getting hurt, right? Because before, like people would think, okay, if I pay the ransom, then I would not get hurt. I'm safe. My people are safe. But if we're seeing that turn, what can we do to totally eliminate it? Because this is not a culture that I think that we should be able to keep on saying, okay, at least we're paying the money, we're getting our people back. How do we just eradicate kidnapping? Do we take the system of never negotiate with terrorists, and when we stand on business, then it's not going to happen again? Or what do we do?
Yeah, I think it's strange enough. I think there are a couple of things we have to do as a country to eliminate it. I think I'll just try to articulate my point, raising five broad points. The first one is we need to look at the economic drivers. Just 1 second, please. There are five broad things. Yeah, there are five broad things government must do to end kidnapping. I think the first thing is we need to tackle the economic drivers. Remember, just like you laid out, especially in the rural Northeast, many young people have taken to drugs and they have become, they've been captured within the crime industry. There's massive unemployment. Even for those that want to work legitimately, because of insecurity, they can't go to the farm. So by extension, there's a problem, right? We have a poverty problem, we have an unemployment problem. That is a nesting ground to recruit an army of young people, able people, into this network. Remember, there's terrorism involved. The second thing we need to understand also is that we need to invest in rural development, in how we tackle these economic drivers. We need to invest in education. We need to create jobs. If you look at Zamfara, Katsina, Kaduna, for instance, these are high-risk states. If you look closely at the state and you ask yourself this hard question, if you don't take up job as a farmer, or if you don't join these people, maybe in mining, what can you do as a young person? Right, that's a problem that needs to be addressed. The naira is also a problem, right? You cannot continue shifting the goalposts. People accumulate wealth in terms of savings, and then government's high-handedness, economic instability erode those savings when they begin to print money. And then the savings is eroded. And then before you know it, because the savings is eroded, naira had fallen compared to dollar, the price of commodity jumps up, especially for oil and PMS and all those things jumps up. And then that pulls along with it, I would like what the price of every other things in the country. Why the income of people remains stagnant, and that creates this economic burden. So we need to, I mean, we could talk so much about the economic drivers of this crime in any society, but we need to end the situation whereby Nigeria is actually a breeding ground for armies that continue to fuel terrorism even within the West African, I mean, within the African region. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we need to close gap in rural areas, security gap specifically. If you look at the rural areas, most kidnapping happens in ungoverned spaces. I mean, let's be candid with ourselves. If you go to some rural areas and you speak to them, I've done that before, you speak to a child there, some of them don't even know who a policeman is. If you have one police there, maybe there's one police in the whole region, they don't even know who the policeman is. They don't exist. They've not seen them before. Even when there are crimes, most of them rely on their local chiefs and then the local people there to address it. Remember, you have a lot of forests, you have a lot of lands, and so it's people operate freely. Government does not do anything about it. And that's why you see them rolling around on bikes for kilometers without anybody intervening. We need to stop that. We need to begin to closely monitor what's going on in the country, ending crime before it happens. I mean, we could go on and on. Government needs to establish a permanent security outpost in most of these areas. It's not this temporary thing that they mount on the road and then they use that as a means for extorting people. That's not security. We need to set up outposts. We need to make sure that we prevent crime from happening. We need to move from the mindset of defense that we have one way or the other seen as a way to secure ourselves. It's not a way to secure this. You have to secure yourself. You have to end crime. You have to stop crime from happening. Not after it has happened, then you now run around and kill people more. No, that's not it. We need to use the concept of policing and a lot of intelligence. We can go into that. I know SBM have done a lot of issues around this, so don't let me dive and spend so much time on this. The third one is about targeting the financing network. Remember, sometimes last 2 years ago, when they suddenly came with this concept of redesigning and recoloring the Naira note, right? And then you cannot see cash and all those things. If you look at the numbers within SBM, you see that carefully they're trying to limit around kidnapping chain. But if you look at the number, so my take here is this. I'm not saying that that's an efficient way, putting every other person, right? Everybody in the country at arm's way because you claim you want to do certain things. I think there are political undertone to that. But carefully, if you look closely at the financial network, how ransom flow, both between criminal and the terror group, government needs to monitor those suspicious financial transactions going on. Things around mobile money, the cattle market, all those things, you need to monitor them. I mean, you need to take sensors, you need to know what you are doing as a country, how goods flows, you need to look at that. Because we have to remember illicit financial flow that we've always done is about you transfer money from this account. Why did you transfer? Those are simple things. But most of the transactions we are talking about happen with cash. So how do you monitor that? There are ways, there are systems for doing that. We need to put that in place and move it forward. I'll run over this. Number four, we need to break down a labor force system, this forced labor concept that we have. If you go to most people's house, even in Lagos, you will see children, right, are being forced into labor. If you ask those children questions, some of them will tell you horrible story of how aunties have sold them into slavery, even in Lagos. We need to end this. Government needs to take this serious and begin to put a stop to it. We need to begin to rebuild our trust in institution. So if we could do all those things and pull together, and we have a good mind to get things to work, I think we'll end this concept of kidnapping. The truth is that there's massive demand for forced labor in Nigeria. If you go across, even in Lagos, you look at the middle class and you speak to them, most of them will tell you, yes, I need somebody to come and help me in my house, right? And most of them are looking for this young girl that is not 18 years old to come and do the work for them. Essentially, if you ask the person that is coming in, that person has either been sold directly by their parent or by a close relative into their lives of slavery. That is completely wrong. We need to put a end to that. If you need somebody to be a domestic worker, go and employ somebody that's above 18, and there must be laid down procedures around that. That needs to end. We need to ask ourselves that hard question. And that cascade across. In fact, if you go to some companies, the way they treat their workers, they treat them like just slaves. I'm telling you, your gas step out of car, people will have to rush there to go and carry bags. That mentality needs to end as a country. And the way we can end it is actually by strengthening our legislative system and the enforcement to ensure that people that are caught in that web ash are dealt with severely. And with that, you can begin to build board. I mean, just go outside the country and go and employ a 16-year-old as a domestic worker in your house and see what happens to you. I think if we can put all those things together, we can close down that market. People that are caught are shown. It's not that you end up forgiving them or you say, oh, they are just A, B, C, D, and then you leave them. If we can do that, certainly you'll begin to see corrective measures and things will begin to move in the right direction.
Really, really, really like amazing like strategies and recommendations to be able to tackle kidnapping in Nigeria. So we move on to our second story. So Nigeria and Brazil have signed an air service agreement. Now, how can we ensure that beyond the direct flights, what strategies can both countries ensure that this agreement translates in a sustained trade, tourism, and cultural exchange on one end? And on the other end, how can we as Nigeria and Brazil, how can we ensure that local businesses and SMEs and not just only large corporations benefit from this new air corridor that has been built by this agreement?
Yeah, I think, yeah, this is an interesting, I'll call it the Brazilian-Nigerian relationship. We have to remember that Brazil, culturally, and Nigeria were tied together. In fact, the first left sets of slaves that got their freedom in the New World actually came to Nigeria and then they set to, I mean, you could see their houses, or some of them have been destroyed because, again, those cultural changes, we did not put it together. So we've gone way back. And even if you look at prehistory, of course, the before the history of colonialization in Africa, relationship and trade had always occurred between people in West Africa and then the people that were living in Brazil, they were living in Americas at that time. So we have a very cordial relationship. We are, well, inevitably, we are brothers. If you look at our climate, they are very similar. If you look at our peoples, everything looks so similar. And that's why if you go to Brazil today, they have the highest number of black people outside of Africa. And that tells you a whole lot of things. If you look at Lagos, very, very similar to what you see in Brazil. So it's important to see that there are a lot of cultural reasons why we're tied together. And so because of that, we need to tell our stories completely different. And the only way you can tell those stories is when the two of you often share cultures, you move around, which is in the big bulk itself is tourism. Now, to your big question, which is an interesting question, you ask how Nigeria and Brazil can ensure that this agreement actually deliver good results. I think the first thing is we need to build it beyond just passenger flights, focusing on trade and cargo. Why it's good for people to go, I mean, travel to Brazil, I see Rio de Janeiro, I see the beautiful blue seas in Brazil. I take pictures, post on them, Instagram, do all those kind of things. They are fantastic, yeah. It doesn't resonate with the poor man on the street. Most of them have not left their village since the day they were born. That's the reality. I've seen people that have not left where they were born, the immediate village that they were born, and they're already 60 years. They spent 60 years in that little convoy. But the only thing that can get to them is things around trade, things around cargo, goods to buy. If they are farmers, they want to export the agricultural goods to that place. They want to be able to pick up maybe machinery from Brazil and all those kind of things. First thing first, for local business, it's not just about people flying, it's about goods moving. It's about, and when I say goods moving, services moving, Brazil is actually very good in agriculture in terms of they have a very strong what I call industrialized agricultural system. They produce tractors, they produce harvesters. Maybe it's time to learn from them. I'm not saying go there, go and buy tractors. I know, yeah, the last government had this agreement with them, with the World Bank, where they buy tractors, they bring it to Nigeria. We are going to industrialize. It never materialized. We need to learn from them. How do we produce our own tractors? How do we produce our own harvesters? How do we produce our own tools and equipment to actually drive agricultural sector? I think it's important to mention that's number one. Number two, also how we industrialize as a country. Remember, in Nigeria in the 60s, uh, the kind of drink that we drink, the hot cocoa or what we call tea in Nigeria, used to be made from barley, right? We import, and barley is not produced in Nigeria. We usually import barley from Europe, from Europe down to Nigeria, and then we use that barley to produce the Milo, the Choco Milo. I don't want to mention names of brand there that you see them drinking. We had to go to Brazil, who had been one way or the other taking our local cocoa, right? Our local the cocoa that is produced in Africa and transform it into malt extract. And then with that, we could produce our own unique Milo, Bonvita, and all those kind of brands that we see around you today. If you ask yourself, anywhere you travel in the world, they don't have the kind of Milo, Shokuma. That happened during the SAP era, right? During the SAP era, I know a lot of bad things around SAP, structural adjustment, but it happened during that period. So, what other things can we pick from them, right? We are building cement factory from the Chinese, but we can also learn from the Brazilian in terms of the agro highlight industry. So those are potential hotbed for us to build on. The second thing is that we need to certainly support our local airlines and business. I like the fact that that's incorporated into the arrangement, but we just have to make sure that nobody shifts it. The same thing for the hotels and the logistics company and all those things. And then people that produce content also. That's a big industry in Nigeria. How do we incorporate them into this agreement? So they are critical because they create those contents, they create values. And when you create values, certainly you create jobs, you create money, and the economy is good for it. Yes, when you look at Nigerian content creators, I know people look at them as they are making job, but the truth is that they are very good resources for bringing in goods into the country? How can we take our content? How can we take our products into Brazil itself? We should be looking at those kind of cultural exchange. I would like to see Nollywood movies actually being converted to, I mean, having what do you call it now, caption that is in Portuguese that Brazilians begin to watch. How do we take it to that level? How do our music go into Brazil? So we just have to take it beyond that itself. Number three is the visa process, which is the big elephant in the room. How do we simplify it? How do we make it easier for people that are going to do legitimate business uh, in Brazil get the visa? And it's the other way around also. It's very difficult to get visa to come to Nigeria. I know we talk about that a lot. How do we also improve things for other people also? So we need to look at that also. I think overall, as long as we have strong the policy system is stable, and then there's trust that has been built across those borders, certainly things will begin to work. So don't let me dwell too much on this. I think it's a welcome development. And I must warn that this is not the first agreement we've had in the past. Under Obasanjo's tenure, if you look at the news, it's just unfortunate that most of the news were not archived, right, into digital form. I know people are trying to do that. But if you look at the news, you will see a whole lot of this similar kind of agreement was signed under Obasanjo's government. I think the Yar'Adua government and Jonathan government also did something similar. So we hope that this is not just one of those, because I visited Brazil, I want to show that something has happened. I hope that it comes to fruition, it translates into money and into good life, good economic well-being, especially for the people of Nigeria, the working poor, not just the rich, the working poor and the have-nots.
I mean, I also liked that you spoke about the creative economy because that's the economy that is booming now, where we currently are in the knowledge economy that is sharing, is turning things around for a lot of economies and boosting economies. And it's really interesting that in this agreement, Nigeria can also leverage on our creative economy as well to be able to drive the agreement, kind of like support it as well. Let's move on to our final story where we talk about Ghana's investment and currency shift. So we're seeing Ghana remove the minimum capital requirement for foreign investors to kind of try to um, get more investment and get more people to have like more jobs. But we're also seeing the Bank of Ghana now restrict large firms from withdrawing foreign currency without matching a deposit to protect the Ghana cedis. In the what short or long-term effect do you think the removal of the minimum capital requirement have for Ghana's investment? Because I think that if the reason I'm going back to think about what was the reason for putting that minimum capital requirement, and in taking that out, is there going to be like a long-term effect on the Ghanaian economy? And how can they like as a country strike a balance between attracting foreign investment and also safeguarding the Ghana cedis as well?
I mean, you just hit the right note here in how we think through things. I think it's important to quickly say this, that one of the going tool that you see being used around the world in the last 10 years, especially people, especially for politicians with very terrible mindset, is actually to divide people. And the best way to divide people is to look at those people, the welfare of those people, and the struggle of those people, right? And once you measure up and you amplify the suffering of people, the welfare that they are not getting, things that they are not getting, you amplify it beyond proportion. And then you turn your gun at people that look completely different or come from different areas and look at them and say, oh, but these people are doing this. And then that creates a little bit of friction. Then you pull the blame of your failure on the other people, and then you divide them, and then what happens is that you see policy. So that's exactly what has happened. We've seen it play itself out. I mean, I'm talking hypothetically here, but these are not hypotheticals. These are real facts. For instance, if you look at the whole of Europe now, you see politicians looking at people that are struggling daily with welfare issues. Um, they're struggling because they don't have enough money to make their life better, and then they turn around and look at another person that is also struggling and say, oh, it's the cause of your problem. And so that's what happened in Ghana back then. People were struggling economically, and then they turn the guns and say, oh, the reason why you are struggling economically is because of this, your brother. It's not allowing you sell. And then policies were created to stop people from bringing money to Ghana, except if you have huge money, right? And so the policies were set up so that maybe people in Africa, people in Nigeria, people in Benin Republic, in Togo can't come into Ghana again to bring in investments. But because the money is there, people from China, people from the US can bring in the money. So something like that was set up. Very, very idiotic and stupid policy that never moved beyond pool. And then the effect of that is that the jobs that you should have created for your young people, you did not create it. You set your country aback, and then you pull yourself into an hole that you are now trying to dig yourself out. Now that you are firmly at the bottom of the pit, and then you are looking for somebody to crawl you out, you are looking for that ladder, then you turn back to the people that you've shot in the foot and then blame for the economic problems that people are legitimately facing, but you are the actual cause, and then you pull it on them. I mean, that's clearly what has happened in Ghana. Now, beyond this, there's a need to move this forward. Whether we like it or not, there are short-term effects. Yes, investors can be excited that, yeah, I want to go and set up shop in Ghana now. I don't need to actually go through all those, which is good. And it's good for Ghana in the sense that if you remove those capital requirements, you lower barrier to entry. That's always what people do. That's the fundamental principle of liberal economy versus controlled economy. If you talk to people that believe in the liberal economy, they believe that government regulations, all those restrictions should be collapsed. Let human beings explore and do things. And then with that, creativity sets in and then things begin to grow. If you look at the Nigerian, a good example is the Nigerian movie industry, the Nigerian music industry, content creation in Nigeria, and then you see that happening, right? Very limited regulation. So once you do that, the excitement of the fact that people can come into your country and do things increases also. And particularly, especially around people that are working in the tech ecosystem. If you are a tech startup, you can go to Ghana to set up. If you are working as an agri-business, maybe you want to do something, you want to set up cornflakes factories or something like that in Ghana, you could go and do it there. You could get services. You could go there and do services. So that's it. That's the beauty of it. And then with that also, but the FS restriction also means that large firm will be very hesitant. Yeah, young people will go, Nigerians, all these people, small business will not care too much about those restrictions. But for big businesses that are looking to set up, if you're saying I bring in my money into Ghana, but I can't take it out because of this rule, of course I'll be very slow in getting it over the line. So that is the first one. The second thing is the pressure on the currency that you mentioned, and then the parallel market growth also. It's almost similar to Nigeria. Let's be honest. Ghana are hoping to protect cedi, but in a long time, they may fuel the parallel market also. If you do anything and you have this restrictive, people will find alternative. Remember, we can take lessons from Buhari's government. Don't let's go back in memory lane. Let's look at Buhari himself. His government. That was what killed Nigeria economy and destroyed almost 30 million full-time jobs in the country. And nobody talks about those 30 million full-time jobs. Today, those jobs have not been created. It will take decades to recreate. In fact, it will take decades to recreate those jobs that the Buhari government threw away. If you look at the Buhari era, what he did around restricting business and all those things, what it does is like it fuels up the parallel foreign exchange market where people will go into and pick up this money, this hard currency, whether you like it and take it out. And one way or the other, you end up paying for it because the inflation will follow through and you never see anything. And that is why I've always believed in the way we manage our currency. Central banks must be on top of the game. The third issue I will raise is about business confidence. It's going to be mixed, right? Small foreign investors will see opportunity in Ghana. Large multinational will feel, oh, Ghana has hit the gold port again. We are not going into it. So those are the short-term impact. The long-term effect is that, number one, we could begin to see the re-emergence of entrepreneurship and job created by Africans, especially Nigerians, in Ghana. I know there are a lot of issues in there, but if this is the case, you see a lot of jobs being created. That I think there's a risk that of investment flight, whether we like it or not, if controls persist in Ghana. That's a long-term impact. Businesses that are already in Ghana will be looking at a long time. Where do I exit this system? We've seen that happen in Nigeria. It's not new. You begin to, so all of a sudden, maybe 5 years or 4 years down, like just see all of them selling off, selling off, selling off. The impact is actually a build up and pile up issue. And that's what they see. Then you see the impact also on the cedi. If Ghana managed to stabilize the cedis through their tighter FX control and attract new investment, of course, the policy will strengthen the economy. But if investors lose confidence in that cedis, right? If they lose confidence in Ghana, typically the cedis will come under great speculative pressure. And what you see, what happened similarly in Nigeria, and it was happening in Ghana before. But I'm telling about contextual issues now, comparing to Ghana. For context, you see that also replicate itself. Of course, there will be regional competitiveness around Ghana. Ghana could emerge as West African investment gateway, especially for small businesses in Nigeria that are looking for where to find money, given the fact that, yeah, people are struggling in Nigeria. The purchasing power of the people had been debased because of this massive I mean, I know people are beginning to build that back up again, the resilient power of Nigeria, classical Nigerian. But what you end up seeing is that Ghana could actually become a very good gateway, especially around the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. People may want to go and set themselves up in Ghana so that they can explore that market. And then alternatively, if excess restriction deter too many investors, I think Cote d'Ivoire or even Nigeria, whether you like it or not, could take advantage back and become I'll call it the golden goose of actually foreign capital. So that's the issues. Yeah. The short time, just to summarize, Ghana may see surge in interest by small businesses, while large businesses will be slow. In the long time, we could see Ghana becoming West African alternative investment hub. But if there is restriction, doesn't create the danger and then the problem we envisage to create, by extension, we could begin to see a situation whereby countries like Nigeria, even Cote d'Ivoire, could take over as actually the investment center for West Africa.
Thank you, thank you, Samuel, for joining us on today's episode. So it's always a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. And it's actually very interesting topic that we had today.
Yeah, today was really, really interesting. To all our listeners, this podcast is by SBM Intelligence. You can access our podcast by searching for SBM Intelligence anywhere you find podcasts. For deeper insights into our work, you can visit our website at sbmintel.com. Remember to connect with us on all our social media platforms. You can find us on X, Facebook, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn at SBM Intelligence. That's all for today. Thank you very much for listening.